Hello, Chris, and this, I guess, will be the second video I made for you. I hope they help. I'll cover 3.1 through 4.1. I'll end with the journal entry about the client and the demographics associated with them. And I will focus on I'll begin with the wireframes that you posted in 4.1 and also include the milestone feedback. So it's a lot, but hopefully the video where I can display the code along with the screen preview will help you out. Chris, your 3 wireframes, they met the bill. You might consider, some more detail. I know they're supposed to be skeletal, but once you decide on one, you might want to do a working sketch, which would include, logo, the right text, and so forth, imagery, photographs. Of the 3, I like where you have conserved vertical space the most, and that would be the one where the logo is off to the side here. The navigation is also contained. This is really hot real estate. I've mentioned this before, I think. You want to conserve space as much as you can. I also like where you have indicated one large image, maybe background image. I think it's a little bit more effective than when you have multiple thumbnails, but it also depends on the character of your restaurant. If they're a family oriented place, maybe they want to see a lot of options on the menu up front. If they're a more sophisticated place, they might be more interested in a elegant interior shot and maybe fewer images. This is a nice sort of balance. Although I think that this is supposed to be your footer, it normally wouldn't occupy so much space. The footer is a good place to put social media links. I'm not sure what else. Also, a sitemap appears in the footer, but typically it doesn't occupy as much depth as that. So you might consider that too. It's always good to design wireframes within a square because you don't know whether they're going to be seen on a vertically formatted device, such as a cell phone perhaps, or horizontal, a desktop computer. And a square accommodates both those landscape as well as portrait formats. Chris, I looked at both your first submission, which is here. This is more like a style sheet, I think, that you've got here. I appreciate your attempt to include a coded sitemap, and the rubric is a little bit unclear whether it should be a coded or a visual sitemap. Later on in the term, it does definitely ask for a coded sitemap. That will become evident as you develop your navigation scheme. And then I see that you resubmitted it, and this one is a much cleaned up version of it. I like this kind of randomly linked sitemap. It reflects, I think, very well the nature of the web, which truly is like a spider web, with no, organized or set path. Most websites are user navigated, and you really don't know what page they'll land on next. You can give them cues, but it's just difficult sometimes to direct navigation. Now I see that you've got a sort of organizational chart, another version of that shows me your file management, what you intend to do, and that's quite a lot of menus. You might want to scale it down for this project, maybe just to have a single menu would be enough, just to replace that. And that can be a link to your PDF file that you did, well, presumably that you did in one of the prerequisites, the print design class. I think it looks good. Be aware that the more levels you have, probably the more difficult it will be to complete a mock-up of your website. You've got the home page, you've got these child pages, which are in the navigation, and then you have these tertiary links. So you might just consider, to make it easy on yourself and certainly meet the requirements of the rubric, these first 2 levels of your site, a home page and 4 or 5, child pages. But if you want to be ambitious, that's fine too. There'll be plenty of opportunities, though, I think, to extend yourself in the design of this, including using corporate fonts. Chris, I went to the link that you gave me, which I think was GRA 310. index2.html, and I didn't see anything. That page was not found, so I sort of deduced that if I went up a directory, I might get the most current version. This raises that issue about, how do you archive older versions? And I see this really lovely, competent thing, which is simply, well, as you not so simply say, is by following the HTML5 Foundations tutorial, Chapter 2. Good job, however you got there. I'm viewing it in Safari for the Macintosh, and you can see that it's a split view. Here's the preview of the image. Nice rollover. I think I commented on that earlier. And then down below is a separate window for the code. I want to point out some things. And then off to the left here is another window that gives me a preview of your file management. This will list all publicly visible files on your server. And it's nice. And I see that you've got, looks like you've got, I'm not sure what that is. Now, there's some things that GeoCities puts on your web pages by default, dynamically, I guess you could say. And the first is this script, which I can isolate here. Don't worry about it. It simply makes your page visible and searchable. So it's necessary, and it's something that we have to live with if we're going to use, these free sites, GeoCities included. The other thing GeoCities puts by default is this, hosted by GeoCities, at the very bottom. And I see that you've got, you're starting to, format it using the div tags. Do you have an external style? Yes, you do. You asked me if it was necessary to, slavishly document your progress from inline styling to embedded style sheet to CSS external, and I say no, as long as you understand what those other two preliminary are. Also know that inline styling overrides any style sheet, so you have to be really careful about using inline styling because it's the easiest to place, but it's really the hardest to get rid of, especially over a site that has many pages. So try to avoid inline styling wherever possible. Use an external style sheet. Chris, I backed up a directory here. I went to Chris Ringo, and I see you just had that one folder of GRA310, and you got it to work. So I don't want to complicate things, but just think about ways to perhaps archive your weekly submissions. Chris, you far exceeded the requirements of this styling, and you've applied style to the heading using the client's colors and a lot of other styling too. Okay, so you've used an external CSS, but you have progressed through Chapter 2 of HTML5 Foundations, I see. So I won't hold that against you. And most importantly, is you've been able to upload to GeoCities pretty well. Now, just your organization of your files could use perhaps a little bit of work to avoid confusion, but great job in every respect. I look forward to seeing how your website is even further refined. Chris, in your journal entry, you defined the demographics based on the client information. A little bit more detail might be good, might help you actually. And you've define what your focus group might be, and perhaps a question or two to ask of them. Think about questions to ask the client. Also, who else might you consider using in your focus group? Kitchen staff, wait staff. If there's a online ordering feature in your website, or if you intend for there to be, ideally, you might consider asking workflow questions about what happens to it. But this is in a real case scenario where you're developing a website for a restaurant. There are many types of market research that you can know about things as apparent under our nose as the U.S. Census. There's also Nielsen, and Google Analytics has many tools to help in researching your market. Yes, I appreciate that you mentioned SurveyMonkey. These are simple tools that you can use to gather data. Good job, and I look forward to seeing how this all shapes up. Since you're so far along with your website, consider making it adaptable start taking a look at it on your phone, okay, now that you've got it mounted someplace that you can see it. And consider making some adjustments based on looking at it on a small device. Good going, Chris.